Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is the first episode of our Women Empowered series. So I will tell you a little bit about WLA, Women Leaders in Action. I'm the president. My name is Adjangba, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The organization started with 5 women who created a support group to meet and talk about our struggles in the various roles played as mothers, daughters, sisters, wives, and work colleagues. Then we decided to expand and form a nonprofit organization. This year, Women Leaders in Action is 10 years old. So we are very happy about the progress we've made so far. We organize community outreach activities and we focus on diabetes education awareness, especially with diabetes preventive care. Our mission is to educate women through personal development and professional development, mentoring, and community outreach activities. Today, we have in our midst Mrs. Sylvia Nkansah. Our topic in this series is special education and coping mechanisms. How do we cope when we have a loved one who has special needs? Mrs. Sylvia Nkansah, please introduce yourself and welcome to our first episode of Empowered Women Empower.
Thank you so much, Auntie Laura. So my name is Sylvia Nkansah, as Laura mentioned, and I am a special education teacher. And I've worked with students on the autism spectrum for a while. I've also worked with students with multiple disabilities, and that's what I'm doing right now. So my job entails going into classrooms and supporting students who are struggling because of their disabilities. So that's what I've been doing. So tonight, hopefully we'll be able to talk about what special education means and the resources available to parents and things that parents can do to help with the education of their children and also reduce their stress levels a bit. So thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I know in our midst, we've also been joined by Women Leaders in Actions, one of our advisory board members, Dr. Ruby Fayose. So she is in the background as well. Welcome, Dr. Fayose. First and foremost, Mrs. Nkansah, can you tell us what special education is about?
Well, special education is very broad, but to just explain it for everybody, for anybody to understand, it's what is put in place to educate every child to make sure that they're to accommodate their needs. So it could be their special needs, it could be a child with autism, it could be a child who is blind, it could be a child who is deaf. So any program or any educational program put in place to make sure that that child's needs are met when it comes to education. So in America, each child legally is entitled to that. So once the child is classified, and we can get into what it means to get classified or get your child classified later on. But special education is, these things that are put together to make sure that the child's needs are accommodated and they are being successful in their education. So in the nutshell, that's what special education means.
Okay. In our midst, I'd like to acknowledge Women Leaders in Action's Vice President, Akosua Serwah-Boadu. She just joined us. Thank you so much for joining, Akosua. Welcome. Having said that, Mrs. Nkansah, what is the first step? I know that under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act idea, that is the law that covers special education. So it's the law that supports and backs parents, meaning that children with these needs have a right to be educated in the way that is best for them. So when one has a child that you envision has issues that need to be addressed, where do you go first?
All right, so kids actually, especially in America, and also in other parts of the world, but in context, we're going to concentrate on what is happening in America now. So a child from age 0 to 3, usually there are resources for them. We call that early intervention. And as the name suggests, early things that you could do, the interventions that you can give to a child that early, from age 0 to 3. So if a parent notices anything that is not going well, if you realize that the child is delayed in their growth, when it comes to speech, when it comes to giving you eye contact, when it comes to responding to their name, usually around age 1, a child should be able to respond to their name when you call them. If you enter a room, a child should turn and at least show you a sign that I recognize people around me. But if the child is not doing any of that, the child is not giving you any eye contact, the child is not smiling back when you're smiling with this child, when you're trying to get the child's attention and all the child does is look away, these are some of the red flags that we look at. So if you see any of these things and the child turns maybe 16 months, and again, each child is different. So we are very cautious, when it comes to telling or trying to get parents to look out for these signs that kids are different. Kids grow differently, they develop differently. Some kids in a month can have this growth spurt and everything will happen within that short month. For some kids too, it takes a while. So we don't want to, put all kids in one basket. But there are things that generally, a child who is 2 years old, you want to, if you try to give this child a high five or maybe smile or try to get their attention, you should be able to get some response from that child. Or if you mention that child's name, you will be expecting some response. So if you're not seeing all these things, the first thing is we advise that you talk to the child's pediatrician, because they will be able to, special education teachers will not be able to diagnose this child. So the first step is to talk to the pediatrician of that child. That I've seen this, what is my child supposed to be doing at this age? Do you see any signs? So be open with these conversations with your pediatrician. I mean, they are the professionals and they will be able to look at the child, observe what is going on as against where the child should be at that age. So if the pediatrician, and unfortunately, we have seen kids in our classrooms that parents, I work with kids, pre-K students now, so age 3 to 5 mainly. And we've seen parents who would tell you, my pediatrician told me everything was fine. So I didn't even think of getting in any early intervention for my child, because they said, oh, it will be okay. The child will be okay. The child will be okay. And also sometimes the culture of the mother or the father or the parents plays a very, very vital role in getting services or getting early intervention for these children. So what we've realized, that what I have personally seen is in our community, in our African community, it's special education is something that we don't willingly embrace, and it's because of our culture. So we are not very open to that. So we are hoping against hope that this child who needs services will talk on their own, or will start doing the things that we expect them to do. But sometimes they would need some support. That's why early intervention is so essential, that if you realize that your child is not developing as they should, you bring that conversation, you get into that conversation with the pediatrician, and whatever they say, sometimes they might tell you that everything, let's give the child some time, but also do your research. We have so much resources online these days that you can, there are so many support groups for parents, that they can share with you. It's not like you're going above, what your doctor says. But if your doctor says that everything will be fine and you think that early intervention might help, but early intervention is free at least in the state of New Jersey if you qualify. And most parents that I have dealt with qualified, and the kids got the services that they needed. it will not take the disability away, but at least it will reduce the impact that disability will have on that child. So early intervention is so crucial. So that's where it starts from. Then the child transitions from early intervention into pre-K, which is ages 3. So the child ages out of early intervention at 3, and that's when they go to preschool. So in preschool, if the parent still has concerns, or for a kid who actually got early intervention, usually it depends on the school district. But some school districts, they will get that child, they will get that child's information. They will evaluate that child at that point to see if they qualify for special education. So the child could be classified as a preschool child with disability, or they might say, oh, this child is fine, this child doesn't need any special education, and they will, they will be fine in a gen ed or general education setting, which means that the child will be with other children who are typically developing, not children who have special needs like that child. Or the child might not go into a self-contained classroom, which means it's a smaller class. So usually in a pre-K classroom or pre-kindergarten classroom, there are 15 children, and these are typically developing children. But if a child has any disability, maybe the child is nonverbal, which means the child doesn't talk or doesn't have any language. If the child is deaf or hard of hearing, and it depends on the level of disability that that child has. The child might end up in a self-contained classroom, which is a smaller classroom. It could have maybe 7 children if the child is on a spectrum, or it could be about 12 children. It depends on the disability of the child, and also the school district and what their special services are like. So it depends on that child. The services that a child gets depends on their disability, the school district that they are in, and also to some extent, how the parent, the support of that parent, what the parent is willing to do. And sometimes it also comes to the information that the parent has. Sometimes you talk to some parents and they have no idea what they're entitled to, or that child is entitled to, or where to start from to even get services for their kids. So it depends, but it definitely starts from early intervention. If you see that your child might need some support, or a child is not developing like any other child their age, definitely that's where it starts. That's where the child can start getting services or special services. So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
That answers the question. Mike, other question is this: once you feel, sometimes if it's the firstborn, usually most parents say they don't pick it up because there's no one to compare that child to. But if it's the secondborn, usually you realize the firstborn was doing better, so what about this child? So once you go and they do the assessment, once you figure out something is going on, they come up with what is known as the individualized education program, the IEP.
Yes.
IEP. Once the IEP is done, what happens, and what is the IEP in essence, the individualized education program? What is that assessment? Is it done by the school alone or a group of experts? And how does that come into being, and how is that followed?
All right. So the IEP, as you mentioned, Laura, is the individualized education plan. So it is for kids who have been evaluated or who have been assessed by the child study team. So usually it will be a school psychologist. It could be a speech therapist will have their test. Sometimes an occupation therapist will also have a test. A counselor might have a test. So it depends on the age of that child and what assessment that they will administer to know what services they might need. So once that is done, and the child is accepted into a particular program, and they establish that this child would need speech, this child would need occupation therapy. Usually occupation therapy is ways for the child to use their gross motor, the movements of their arms and the big muscles, It could be also
fine motor skills.
Yes, the ability of that child to grasp a pen and write, because sometimes if a child is on the spectrum, if a child has autism or other disabilities, these things that come to kids easily, do not come to them, as easily as they do to other kids. So once these are established that this child will need all these services, then this plan is put in place. So they might say, all right, so this child will see a speech therapist maybe twice a week. They will see an occupational therapist twice a week. And these are legal documents. It goes into this IEP, and that's what the special education teacher follows. So if the special education teacher has to see this child twice a week, it depends on the setting, right? So I think I mentioned the setting earlier, that some kids, because of the level of their disability, they might be in a smaller classroom, which we call the self-contained classroom. So it might have a special education teacher and maybe one or two assistant teachers, or we call classroom aides, that work with kids directly and support them throughout the day. And we have speech therapists coming, we have occupation therapists coming throughout the day to support this child in that small setting. For some kids who are able to do general education setting, who will be able to study alongside their typically developing peers, they will also get the services. So they might have a special education teacher come in to support them. Maybe on their IEP states that they need maybe 20 minutes twice a week. So the special education teacher will go into their classroom for 20 minutes twice a week to work with them. If they have to support them, with their math and with their reading, they would do that. The speech therapist might be able to, and again, it depends on what is agreed upon at this meeting, because at the meeting, these usually after the assessment, let me just go back a little. After the assessment, there is a meeting where the parents are invited, and all the people who were part of the evaluation will be there. They will that's where they will go over their reports. And I've seen how overwhelming this will be for some parents, and especially for parents who have no idea, what special education is. It's their first time of being told, what their child can do and cannot do. It could be very overwhelming, and all the jargon sometimes that are thrown at this parent. And sometimes these meetings are very long. So I'm sure that the mom is ready to go. So they will accept whatever you tell them. Okay, your child will receive this. But this is a time that the parents should be asking questions. What does it mean? 20 minutes, where will this happen? How is that going to help my child? I don't think, if you have the right to say, I don't think this is enough. I think my child might need more than 20 minutes twice a week. Is it possible to get that? But again, it depends on how informed the parent is. So if you know a special education teacher, I've actually I've joined meetings with my friends before. So if you want me to join, of course, if I have the time, I will definitely join, because I understand how overwhelming that will be. But I think that in order to get the services that your child is entitled to, or that will really, really help your child in their education, you need to be informed. You need to know what to ask for at these meetings, because if they give you all these reports and they just tell you your child is going to receive 20 minutes twice a week, that might not be enough, because depending on the level of that child, sometimes if the child is in an elementary school, the transitioning from one class to the other alone takes about 5-10 minutes, and that is part of the 20 minutes. So the child might not be getting enough. So if the parent is informed ahead of time and knows what to ask for at these meetings, there are actually support groups in New Jersey that somebody can volunteer to come to these meetings and ask the questions for you. I've been at meetings where parents get lawyers to come with them, and it's free. These services are free. So please, they are all over the internet. If you want to ask Auntie Laura too, I'll be more than happy to share those links with you. that you can follow and get support. But
Absolutely.
I think the most important thing is to get informed. There are so many ways that you can get support for that child, and to, I don't want to call it fight, but advocate. I think advocate is a better word, to advocate for your child. But you have to know what is out there. You have to know what the child is entitled to. So when you are at these meetings, you know what you're talking about, you know what you're asking for. So you don't get bullied, per se, into accepting, but you are getting the best for your child, because that's what kids deserve, actually. So.
Okay. The other thing I have to ask is this: a lot of times parents go in, like you said, unequipped, overwhelmed. Even the terms. I looked up some of these before even this interview. It's very intimidating. And at the meetings with these experts, is there someone, a social worker or somebody who can break it down to the parent that your child has speech delay? However, this is what can be done. And if it's not enough, we can actually come home and do a little bit of work in the home settings, because sometimes it's as simple as telling the parent. And I remember a friend had this issue with a child, and the parents would speak to the child in both English and the native tongue. And for the child, it was confusing because some children will manage well in that setting, others wouldn't. So the speech therapist coming into the home setting realized that was going on. And so she said, to make it a little bit easier for your child, you can speak both languages, but do me a favor. When the father speaks, let him speak English. When you speak the native tongue. Why? When the child sees you, the mother tunes in. When the child sees the father, makes that switch. Because where a kid is having speech delay and you are speaking two languages, it could be confusing. Something as simple as that was very helpful to tune the child into what to do. And that was very difficult for the parent to understand, because back home, and this parent was from Ghana, you went into the playfield, they spoke Ga, Twi, all the languages, and you navigated what you could. You came home, you went to school, you speak English. So it wasn't an issue. It took her a while to digest that. But when she followed the speech therapist's approach, the child seemed to be doing much better and eventually was able to. Can you touch on how these experts are sensitive to cultural needs of the parents and the child alike?
I think that's where the child study team is coming to, where they will be culturally responsive to, where the parent is coming from. But sometimes they are not able to do all of that because they haven't lived, the life of the parents. They don't really know the background of the parent. But multi-language is very good. According to research, it's very good for brain development. So it's not even supposed to impede development of this child. But some way, somehow, for kids with disabilities, it's very difficult to absorb all that is thrown at them at once. So I'm really, that's a very, very interesting one, for that parent to get that information. And again, like I mentioned, information is so much powerful when it comes to supporting your child with disability. If you don't talk, you might not know what's out there. You might never get the support that your child needs. And talking to people, sometimes it will feel like you are bothering them, but it is for the good of your child. So if you have to advocate, if you have to call and send that email to that social worker each day, that's what you have to do as a parent, because it makes a difference. Those services make a whole. I taught a child, and he was nonverbal till he was 6 years old, until he started speaking. And it's interesting because I saw the zeal in the mom. I saw the advocacy that the mom put up to get all the support that she could get for this child. So it makes a difference. So don't, again, like you mentioned, it feels intimidating. That the words are big, and if you haven't really gone to school for that, you might not understand some of these words. And the meetings sometimes are long. And I remember I sat through a 2-hour meeting, and the parent needed the parent was non-English speaking, and they needed to translate whatever was said in English. So you can imagine how overwhelming that was for this parent. So it gets to a point that I'm sure it will be overwhelming, but that's when, even before the meeting, you can call the social worker, or you can call whoever you're comfortable with at the school, even the teacher. Talk to them about the meeting, about the impending meeting. What is going to happen? What questions can I ask? What do you think I should ask for? And as a teacher, sometimes I can suggest a few things for you. Will you be able to get all of that? Maybe not. But at least you are informed. At least you are going in armed with some information or some things that you can ask for, you can advocate for. The worst they can do is say, oh, we have to think about it, because sometimes the child study team itself might not be able to make that decision. They might have to forward that to their bosses to approve that. But there is always a way to go around these things. So there's nothing like asking for too much. Again, it is about the child. It's not about anybody else. But I have seen that parents who come to these meetings informed, who have questions and who have recommendations and who ask, they get the best services for their children. So if anything, please make time. If you cannot read it on your own, find somebody who can help you. Again, we have so many. The support is sometimes overwhelming when you even get on the internet, but the support groups are out there. Yeah, we have so many support groups. Like I said, you have somebody who will accompany you to these meetings for free at no charge at all to you. So please make use of those and let them help you, to get these services. Yeah.
Any questions from Ms. Akosua Serwah-Boadu, the VP? Do you have any questions? It's open.
I wanted to ask Sylvia, how often are these kids reassessed? And I think my second question is that, let's say you are teaching the kids and you see a good amount, when do you make recommendations as to does this kid go to another class or move on to it? Is there a time frame, or you can do it any time in the school year?
Usually, I can't even overemphasize how powerful, or the power that parents have. So a parent can ask for a meeting at any time. This is how powerful parents are in the education of their kids. But as a teacher, I can tell that we usually communicate with the child study team a lot. So I can tell, usually we send out progress reports every quarter about how the child is progressing in their learning. But usually some kids have, like, every year, they usually have every year we'll have at least one meeting about that child to review their progress and to see if they need more services, if they are making progress or they're regressing, or where we are and what can be done. So usually every year. Some kids get specific tests or specific assessments maybe every other year. So it depends on that child, but at least every year we evaluate where they are. Not necessarily like specific assignments, but we get together, the parent with the child study team, with the special education teachers to assess, how the child is doing, to see if we need to add services to that child, if the setting is good, if the child can still be in a general education setting, or the child has to go into a self-contained classroom, which alone is a very huge process. It doesn't happen easily, but it can happen if the parent advocates for it, if the parent is on board and agrees to that, it can happen. I've also had a student, he's like my poster child in special education. So I started with him in kindergarten. And in 4th grade, he went as in a self-contained classroom. He's on the spectrum. And I remember he went into gen ed class. I made a recommendation and he was able to go into a gen ed classroom. And I was walking in our hallway one day and he called Miss Nkansah. I said, wow, who is this? And so I walked with him to his new classroom. And the teacher goes, oh, wow, was he your student? I said, yeah, he was my student. I said, the teacher told me, I never knew he was in a self-contained classroom until today, because he is doing so well. He's an honor roll student. I'm like, wow. So, and this I give every single credit to the mom, because this mother was on it. He will always ask you how the child is doing. What can I do? And anything that you suggest, this woman will put it, will make sure that he does it at home. And again, it all comes to, what the parent is willing to put in, so it happens. And to Akosua's question, it depends on how the child is doing. And again, the mom can call for a meeting at any time. If it cannot happen immediately, the child study team will get back to you and let the parent know that yes, we can have a meeting at this date, but yes, that's the power that the parent has. They can always call for a meeting if they think there's something that needs to be addressed. And they can always write letters asking for what they think that will benefit their child. Again, at the end of the day, it is about that child. And I hope that parents will see that and use that power that they have to get the support that their kids need.
Thank you. We'll move on to Dr. Ruby Firesay. Dr. Firesay, do you have any questions for Sylvia? We're learning a lot about the education system today, so please feel free. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Sylvia. That has been super helpful. One thing I've always wondered is if, as part of the IEP program, they integrate social, services for the child. So in as much as children with special needs have difficulty, learning academic material, a lot of them also have social challenges. And in the school, invariably these children are picked up on, and sometimes they are bullied. And so I was just wondering, in terms of the package that is provided for them, is social integration in the school part of it, and how is this really addressed? Because it's one thing to make sure that they're able to excel academically, but those social connections and making friends in school is also very important. So if you can speak to that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
You're very right about that, Dr. Fayez, and thank you for the question. Yes, so the social interaction is one of the things that most kids with special needs struggle with, and it's most of the time in their IEPs, they will have that specifically in their IEPs and how to do that. So for me, as a special education teacher, if I go to a classroom, I might have only one student in that classroom, but I will tell the teacher that I'll work with 2 other students, just so I will have some interaction, going on with my particular student that I'll be working with. So in the IEP, usually it will have that specifically in the IEP written down, how this child will be supported to develop their social, emotional skills as well. So for speech, for example, sometimes they will give them one individual that will be one-on-one and one group setting. So it will be, even the one-on-one, they probably will be in a group setting also, just so they will get the chance to interact with other students or other children their age, and not just the adults in the classroom. For children in self-contained classroom, sometimes the teachers have to make sure that they set it up in a way that these kids not forced, but they create room for interactions like that. So I worked in a school where our class, which was a self-contained classroom, was paired with a general education class. So when we go for specials, when we go for music and art and other specials during the day, it's not just my class, but my kids are able to interact with students from a general education setting, and that was helpful. So, and again, it depends on the school district. I mean, it's definitely, if you are in a school district that is smaller and they are able to execute special education as it should be, the impact will be better than some areas. So special education is just like any other thing that we can think of in America, right? So where you are, or the school district usually can determine how successful that child will be, or the services that this child will be. I know some friends in other school districts who have social circles for these kids even after school. So these kids go in and they sit in circles, and these things are planned just so these kids will have these interactions. I've also I went to school with someone who was sharing with me that in their district, in their town, their autism program, the kids barely sit in the classroom. They go into the town almost every day. They have a farm. They have a chicken coop or something like that. So all these things are programs that will get these kids talking. A child might be just interested in the farm, and will get him. So ways to get them talking, ways to get them integrated in the society more. So it depends on the school district, it depends on the school. But another thing that I want to put out here is, if your child is in a public school, in a district, and you realize that over the years they are not progressing that much, you have you're entitled to ask for a placement. So if you think there is a private school outside of your district, or even within your district, that will offer better services for that child, you can ask for that, because most school districts have the money to. I know it's expensive. Sometimes we are talking about 80,000 a year per child, but school districts have money for that. It is up to the parents to ask for this. That over the years, my child has been here for 4 or 5 years, and I don't see the progress that I think my child, should be making. And it depending on how you go about it, and depending on the school district, depending on how forceful you are and determined you are, you might be able to get that child into that smaller school or that specialized school that you think will support your child better. So again, but social emotional skills, teaching social emotional skills is one of the topmost things that special education or special education specialists do. So Dr. Faisal, I don't know if that answers your question completely.
Yes, thank you.
You are very welcome. Yeah.
Sylvia, the other question that comes to mind when you talk about special needs children is support groups for the parents. So if you're a parent with a special needs child, let's say you're a single parent, you have to juggle work, you have to juggle taking care of this child or children. Are there support groups that you can, be a part of, so you realize it's not just you, or even pair up with another parent so you can take turns picking up the children from school? But are there any support groups like that?
I was very surprised a couple of years ago when a parent told me that she's actually entitled to about 2 or 3 hours of babysitting at home because she has a child with special needs. So it's the support is out there. You just have to find it. You just have to. And I think one of the ways to find it is joining a support group, like you mentioned. And again, it's on Facebook, it's on all these social media platforms, and you can Google. And again, I will share some of the links with you also after this, so parents can access these support groups. But I think it's very, very important that you try to join a support group, even if you don't want to bring your child up in these groups. It's fine. You can be a silent consumer. The good thing is, maybe somebody might be going through the same thing that you are going through as a parent, and they might share how they dealt with or how they are dealing with, and that will help you as a parent. And that is why I always say, share it. If you're not comfortable sharing it within your setting, you can use the internet. And you can be anonymous on it. You can just consume what is coming, and you can just practice or use some of the strategies that somebody or a parent is sharing over there, and see how that will help. But if you keep everything to yourself, I think our stress levels will just increase, and we don't want that. That is. I've actually had parents who have had very very difficult times because it gets overwhelming. I mean, raising a typically developing child is in itself is not easy. It's a lot of work. So to add a child with disability to the story is another stress level altogether. And you don't want to, take that burden upon yourself and not be able to share or get the support that you need. Again, like I mentioned, that you can get a lot of support. You just have to talk, and you just have to find those support groups. And again, like I mentioned, I was surprised, very, very surprised when the parent said, I can get 2 or 3 hours of daycare. Somebody will come to my home, and if I have to go out to do something. So if somebody is coming to your home for 2 hours, then you can take a walk as a mom, or you can even run to do grocery. That's 2 hours, that you can have for yourself. And you can only get to know some of these things that you are entitled to, or you can access if you talk to other parents, who are living that experience, who'll be able to share what they are getting, and you'll be able to access that. So hopefully, if you are watching and you have a child with special needs, you will reach out. You will reach out. We understand you're doing the best you can. It's not easy, but if you get these services, if you get the support that you need for your child, hopefully it will get a little easier, than it is. So please reach out. Please look for these support groups, definitely, and let's see, how that will help a little.
One issue that is always associated with special needs children or special education in general is the stigma. How does the school handle the issue of stigma? In other words, a lot of parents would rather put a lid on it than acknowledge and come to terms with, my child is not speaking well. It could be speech delay. Let me address it now, or it will fix itself, because I do not want my child to be labeled. From listening to parents with this type of issues, a lot of times just the fact that the child is labeled as a special needs child is bothersome psychologically for parents, because as parents, you want your kids to be labeled as normal. So the special, even though it's been changed, special ed, special needs, it's still special. And kids have been known to be teased in class, what's so special about you? In, other kids taunting them and making them feel uncomfortable. How does the school system address the stigma? The other issue that you mentioned, which is very interesting, is you mentioned in-class support, meaning that a child who's been classified as special ed could be in a regular gen ed class, but then there'll be someone walking around helping that child or giving that child special attention when they have issues. How is that, played out so that the child does not feel like, I don't want this need? Why is this special in-class support teacher always walking towards my desk to help me? And overall, how is that stigma addressed so that people don't see special ed as an issue to be, covered as opposed to addressed?
All right. So I think it comes back to early intervention, because most of these disabilities, the earlier we address them, the better. So it's would you rather have that stigma, or you will get the support for that child? I know, would you rather worry about the stigma or get the support that the child needs? I remember a couple of years ago, my group of teachers that I work with, we decided to go out and in our school, we had about over 1,000 students. We decided to go to each class to talk about, that was, I think, in April, during Autism Awareness Month. We decided to go out and talk about autism so that kids will know, the children in the school will know what autism is, why some kids, why some of our children behave differently, why they are in a different classroom, and what they can do. So we placed the that responsibility on the children and what they can do to support children, who will need their support. And it was interesting, the conversations that we're able to have in these classrooms, where the kids realize, oh, okay, so this is why this friend behaves this way. And you could hear the conversations, around the school after we did that. And I think it was very, very powerful for kids to realize, to learn firsthand what autism was, and to know that some kids are different, and it's not okay to make fun of a friend, but what I need to do is really support that child. So I think that's one of the things that schools are doing now, and maybe as a parent you can bring it up to your school, also ask if they're doing anything about that. But when it comes to the stigma that you mentioned, I know sometimes we can control some of these things. I wish that it's not there because it makes that child uncomfortable in school. But it's, especially with a child with an IEP, we don't really go around, telling everybody that this child is because it has to be discreet as possible. So even when we are sending emails, we are not using the full name of this child. Sometimes we just use the initials of that child, just to protect the identity of that child. So it's usually amongst the child study team and the teacher, or anybody who has something to do with that child, who has to, who will have access to their IEP. So if it's handled well in the school setting, this child will not have any stigma. If the child is getting support, again, it depends on the school. So if the understanding is there, if it's, I don't know how to say it without sounding offensive, but again, it definitely depends on the school and how the school handles it. If the school handles it very well, you wouldn't even know that this child is getting any services. It's just, and again, special education teachers are trained that when I go into a class, even though I might have 1 or 2 students, I probably will call 3 other students if they are able to do the work, within that group. If 5 kids if I'm able to work with 5 children without a child being, disruptive, or if I'm able to work with these 5 children, it helps. That way, you don't even know which child is classified or which child has special needs. The kids might know. Sometimes they might, some kids are vicious and not very nice. They might call this child name. But as a parent, I would rather get the services that this child needs, than to worry about the stigma, because the child can age out of special education. They don't have to have it, till they go to college. Some kids have it to college, and it actually helps them, because instead of, writing an exam within an hour, they might get unlimited time to write that exam. So think about it that way, that if my child will be too anxious to write this test, and they can actually have the whole day to write the test, I would rather have that, make sure that my child is successful, and overlook every stigma. If you have to have a talk with your child every day about what is going on and why they need, or why they're getting that extra support, I think it will help. Again, it depends on that child. If you have met, there's a saying that if you have met one child with autism or one child with disability, you have met one child. So it depends. Each child is different. There are kids who stand up to their bullies and say, "I'm smarter than you," so you can't bully them. So it depends on that child. But the stigma, I wish that parents will not focus on the stigma. They will rather focus on the support that the child needs. Again, if they're able to get the support that they need as early as they can, there might be, like I mentioned earlier, I have a student when he was moving from 3rd grade to 4th grade, he went to a general education classroom, and that was just so gratifying, to see. So it is possible. If you need to get the services for the child for even 1 year or 2 years in pre-K, and maybe when they go to kindergarten or 1st grade, they're able to do it without any support, fine. But please don't worry about the stigma. No child, no special education teacher or child study team member will go out to announce that this child has an IEP, or this child is classified, or this child has this disability or not. But if the child needs the support, please allow the child to get the support that they need. And hopefully down the line, they will be able to, they will age out and they wouldn't need, those services anymore. And that's all we are looking for, for our kids. So I wouldn't worry much about the stigma.
Akosua, do you have any other questions for Sylvia?
I think we talked about the support group for the parent. I'm also wondering if there are support groups for siblings and even the child's family, cousins, because it becomes a bit difficult when they expect to play with their cousin, and their cousin is not responding to them, or sometimes they get a little bit, upset. I think that's my question for now. Thank you.
I like that. So one of the things that we have done, or teachers are doing, and we are special education teachers, we are encouraging general education teachers to do, is to be conscious about telling or teaching kids that each child is different. So in their classrooms, we're encouraging that they read books, about kids with special needs. So you're not talking about one child, but you are talking about a child that, it could be a fictional character who has special needs and what they do. And it could be similar to a child that is in your classroom. So kids have an idea of what it means to be different. And they might, it depends on the grade level, but the kids might be able to say, oh, maybe, kids are different. Maybe that's why our friend over here is different. That's why when we try to play with our friend, he doesn't respond as, every other child does. So I think the awareness is what we are all hoping that we all create awareness in our homes, at our schools, at our churches. So wherever that child is, all the adults around, all the children around are aware that, this child might need some compassion, and it's not all kids actually need that compassion. Some kids are fine without your compassion. They play in their own corner and they are fine. They might not bother you. They might not give you the eye contact, but they know you are present. You play over there, I will play, and I'm comfortable, I'm okay. But some kids will be open to some kids might come into your space. Sometimes they don't have that spatial awareness, so they might be in your face too much. But if adults, I've had parents tell me, I stopped going to church, I stopped going out because my child couldn't handle it. And I think that society is yet to come, to that term. Society is still learning how to accommodate our kids with special needs. So sometimes once that child starts screaming in public, or once that child starts being uncomfortable, and maybe they have to be taken out for a little walk, everybody starts staring, everybody starts wondering, are you going to do something about this child? When that child starts taking off their shoes and their clothes. So I think it's taking a while. We all need to do more, I think. And there are so many books out there that we can read to siblings, maybe the younger ones. I think the older ones, we can have a decent conversation about, why this child, or maybe their cousin or their sister behaves the way they, and what we can do. I think the emphasis should be, what can I do to help? What can I do? If Jojo is having a meltdown, what can I do? And you'll be amazed that a 3-year-old can say, oh, I learned that if Jojo is having a meltdown, I can maybe pat Jojo at the back, or maybe give Jojo a rub on their arm or something like that. So I think the awareness creation is what we need to increase. And I'm happy that we have some of these platforms like this one to talk about, what special education means. But I think it would take a while, but it's going. So hopefully churches get on board, that it's okay if you can give your pulpit for us to talk about some of these things and how we can support parents and how kids can support each other. I think it will help. It will create that awareness that we all need. So wherever we are, parents are comfortable, these kids are comfortable, and the parents will not be afraid to take these kids out. So I think
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. We have one last question. All too soon, all good things come to an end.
Oh.
So we have Dr. Fayose, with the last question, but thank you so much.
Sure.
So my question kind of follows what Akosua asked, and especially for the parents. I mean, having a child with special needs, nobody has a textbook that you can read and be able to parent that child. And I know you've talked about support groups, etc., but there are in some cases that parents really need to be coached on how to deal with some of the issues that the children have, especially those who have, severe needs. And I'm wondering, what is out there, and if, the school is even providing some of these services for the parents, or parents have to reach out and use their insurance to get, like a what do you call it, a counselor, a therapist for themselves to teach them, because you have to learn how to deal with a child with special needs. And so what is out there to really help parents understand what the needs are of the child and be able to deal with it?
Definitely, that's a great question. So it's again, you have some primary people that you want to reach out to them. So the teacher, one of the primary sources of your information will be your special education teacher, and also the social worker, and also the case manager. So if you have these three people, always reach out to them, because there are services outside of school for parents, also for students, but for parent support, usually school districts have workshops for parents also. I remember we had one a couple of years ago. We had a parent-to-parent workshop where parents just came in to share their experiences, and I will never forget that, how powerful that was. When they all started sharing the experiences, and tears were flowing in that room, and they all left so empowered, because they realized that I'm not going, through this by myself, or this is not just me, but other parents are also going through that. But definitely talk to your child's teacher, talk to the caseworker, talk to the social worker, and they'll be able to direct you to these, direct you as to where you can find these services. But you want to make sure that these workshops, again, if you don't want to go in person, or if you don't have time to go in person, the virtual space is also good. Just plug in, even if you are working and you can listen in, some of these information could be very, very, very helpful. So use every avenue to get information. I think the most important thing we can do in advocating for our kids and raising our kids with special needs is to get in information. I can't overemphasize that. Once you are informed, you know what to do. I mean, we cannot do everything to take the disability out of the child, but at least we'll be able to be better informed and get ready to support that child to be to perform out their utmost best, and that's what we want to be able to do. I think you mentioned the support that parents will get. Dr. Fayese?
Yes.
I know I'm missing a piece of your question, but I don't remember. I didn't write it down.
No, you've answered most of it. I was just saying, just in terms of, how parents can be taught how to look after a child with special needs, because it's not something that comes to you naturally, right? And if you think about it, the child is only in school X number of hours, the rest of the time the child is with the parent.
Definitely, I like that. I think when you were talking about it, something came to mind I wanted to share. So for most kids with special needs, consistency is key. So if you know what is happening in the classroom and you can replicate the same thing at home, it will really, really help the child. So if the teacher is teaching this child in a certain way, or maybe for the younger ones, for potty training, if you know what the teacher is doing at school and you can do the same thing at home, I think it helps the child to master that skill, as fast as they could. So the home to school connection is very, very important. That's what we ask for. That if your teacher suggests something, or be proactive as a parent, ask, how are you doing this for my child at school? How are you teaching, my child at school? I struggle with getting my child to sit down to write. How do you get my child to do this at school? Then the teacher might give you some strategies. We have various strategies that we use in the classroom. The the teacher might tell you that, tell the child, if the child is interested in this, if you do this, if you do your work, then you get this. There are so many strategies that the teacher might be able to share with you. And again, if it's consistent, from the child knows that when I'm home, I do my homework and I get this toy. And when I get to school also, I do my work and I get this toy. So if there's that consistency between home and school, usually it helps that child. Because for kids with special needs, sometimes, they don't like change. Most of them don't like change. They don't do very well with change. So if something is consistent, it really helps them with their learning trajectory. So if it's something that we can work out, between parents and teachers, so parents know what's going on at home, and teachers know what's going on at home, and parents know what's going on at school, we ensure that consistency, and the child is, they can go in between the two seamlessly, and that really helps them with their learning also. So definitely talk to your parents, teachers, and anybody that is involved with your learning, so you can replicate, you can do whatever they are doing at school that you think they're doing very, very well. You can do that at home. And usually it's not different. It's not something that you have to buy anything extra. You can use things at home. I remember I told it one parent one year that I think your child loves beans, so we use beans to count in the classroom, and they will go and get a big bag of beans and take a picture. I said, oh my goodness, I didn't say that big bag of beans is a cupful, so things like that. So if you have that, if you build that relationship with the teacher, you get the child to do whatever you want them to do, and it's a happy child, it's a happy home, happy school life, and it's the child will do well overall. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sylvia, and I also like to thank Women Leaders in Action's Advisory Board Member Dr. Ruby Fayose. I would also like to thank our very own Vice President Akosua Serwah-Boadu. I'm the president of Women Leaders in Action. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're very grateful. And Sylvia, you know so much about special education, and I hope we will be able to invite you again to have all these discussions that are very critical and crucial to our communities. We thank you for taking time out of your hectic schedule to be with us. This is Women Leaders in Action, empowering women for success. You can get more information about us, WLANJ.org. And we will be posting some of the links that Sylvia mentioned. And just to understand her background, I mentioned her briefly in the beginning, but Sylvia is a special education teacher and early intervention specialist. In that capacity, she works with students with special needs in school settings and also works with kids ages 0 to 3 at home or daycare centers to provide intervention and support in areas of growth in which they have deficits or delays. Sylvia, your work is invaluable. On behalf of Women Leaders in Action, we thank you and keep up the good work.
Anytime.
Thank you, everybody.